Okay. Hi, everyone. I guess we'll take a minute and begin our conversation for the day. Thank you so much for joining for the Kelp and ILA monthly webinar series that we are doing. And we're in the month of May 2025. And today we have a very interesting topic for you, that is gender inclusivity in PoSH, addressing sexual harassment beyond the binary. So we'll take a minute and then we can start the conversation for the day. We have some very interesting lineup of panelists also for you all. Okay, so it's time for us to begin the conversation. Today we are in this discussion because at KELP we believe that inclusion starts at understanding the needs of all your employees. And we often hear conversations about Pride Month in the month of June, but we need to also understand how we are including people who are from different sexual orientations or gender identities, or in fact, increasing the conversation on sexual harassment to workplace safety. So, coming to that, I think at KELP, we believe that it is something that we need to practice year round and have policies in place to protect people from different orientations and not forget them when we are creating our policies, right? So, that being said, I'll start with an introduction on what this webinar is about and why we are here. And today we have this webinar in collaboration with Indian Lawyers Association and KELP. So, Indian Lawyers Association, or ILA as we popularly know it, is a voluntary professional organization for the legal professionals of India. ILA has been formed to shape the future of the legal profession throughout India. It is committed to enable opportunities for quality professional development, support the enhancement of equality in legal profession, and promote the delivery of justice, facilitate effective law reforms, and advance the rule of law in India. ILA aims to support the legal profession by offering access to practical resources for legal professionals to help improve the administration of justice, establish ethical codes, and also develop a professional network. So they work with exchange of information between hundreds of ILA chapters nationwide. Coming to KELP, KELP is established in 2013. It is a forward thinking organization committed to revolutionizing workplaces to safe, happy, and inclusive workplaces with an unwavering belief that employee well being is integral to organizational success. KELP endeavors to set new standards in HR practices and overall organizational performance. So, KELP is a pioneer in simplifying legal complexities in PoSH, that is, prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, and DEI. We aim to demystify the less understood subject of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and bring an intersection of PoSH and DEI together in today's conversation. So, today our topic is gender inclusivity and PoSH, addressing harassment beyond the binary. We have with us two very esteemed panelists. We have Anuradha and Shreyas with us. Anuradha is a seasoned business leader with over 25 years of experience driving impactful outcomes in managed services. She's renowned for developing innovative strategies that significantly elevate operational efficiency, growth, and profitability through pervasive automation and self healing systems and business accelerators. A passionate advocate for customer service and process optimization, Anuradha leverages hyperscalers and AI ops for enhanced observability and seamless orchestration. Her thought leadership enables clients to surpass industry trends through optimal target operating models. So she has proven track record in large scale transformations, global delivery, and contractual frameworks. Driven by a passion for creating safe workplaces, Anuradha has also played a crucial role as the PoSH presiding officer at Mastech for the last 3 years, successfully rolling out numerous innovative initiatives and inclusivity campaigns. Leading from the front, she has been instrumental in fostering a safe, respectful, and inclusive environment at Mastech. Welcome, Anuradha. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thanks for the lovely introduction and thanks for having me over.
Anytime, yes. And we also have with us Shreyas. Shreyas Mogre leads the People's Operations functions at Drip Capital, including recruitment, performance management, and employee wellness. He has a master's in industrial and organizational psychology, and he's passionate about building inclusive, high performing teams. Shreyas focuses on skill development, retention, and creating positive work environments that foster both individual and organizational growth. That's really amazing, Shreyas. Thank you so much for being with us today. Your expertise will hold the conversation for us.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And last but not hopefully least, I am Meenakshi. I am your moderator for today. I'm a lawyer and subject matter expert in PoSH and EI with Kelp for more than 3 years. I have also worked extensively in gender and sexuality for understanding law as a social welfare tool. And I have dabbled a little bit in litigation and different ways that law presents to us. So also going beyond the law, like we are going beyond the binary here in this topic today. So that's just been a little bit of where I'm coming from. That being said, I will jump into why this conversation matters to us before we start with the discussion. Today, why this conversation matters. The PoSH Act in India legally protects only women, and by that interpretation, also trans women, because we read it with Transgender Protection Act of 2019, right? So, what do we do? Like, are the women and trans women the only people who are actually facing sexual harassment? That is something that we need to understand, that it impacts people of all genders. Sexual harassment can happen to cis men, like men who are born as male and were given male identity at birth, and they also continue to identify as men. Cis men, trans men, non binary individuals, in fact, people with different sexual orientations, like gay men, bisexual women, lesbian women, all of them go through different, unique kind of sexual harassment, which is often underlooked by many of us. Now, coming to people from marginalized, like I said, gender identities and sexual orientations, they often are prone to more harassment and are at risk of hyper visibility at workplace, which means that suddenly when there is a queer employee, they are very, very visible in the workplace and they are prone to being pedestalized quite a lot. So, how do we deal with these issues? And a truly safe workplace must extend this dignity that we are talking about and safety and protection to everybody in the office and everyone in the organizational culture. As a corporate citizen, it is our right to have a free, sexual harassment free, safe workplace where we all feel like we can bring our best self. There will be some terms we will be using today, which might be a little bit confusing if you are not aware with the terminologies of the queer community or the LGBTQIA+. We will not be going to detail into each and every identity and exploration around that. We will be mostly talking about how we are going beyond a certain kind of limitation to create an inclusive workplace. So some definitions key terms I will put down for us. First is non-binary. So non-binary person is someone whose gender identity doesn't fit within the traditional categories of male or female. They may identify as male and female, neither, or a different gender altogether. It is a big umbrella, which means there are different identities within the non-binary umbrella. Then there is a term called transgender, which we have already used in the conversation today so far. Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity is different from the sex that has been assigned to them at birth. Example, a person assigned male at birth who identifies as a woman is a transgender woman. And gender binary. Gender binary is a system that classifies gender strictly as male or female, and they exclude all the other identities. So that's why today's conversation that we are having talks about going beyond the binary, right? So that being said, I think I'll stop the explanation and I will bring the discussion forward to our panelists and let us hear from them on what we think about this topic. So my first question would be to Anuradha. Just so that we can get a context, how does PoSH apply to employees beyond the gender binary? How does it apply to men, cis men?
Sure. Meenakshi, thank you for giving the context around, those terms. And of course, we hear a lot about POSH these days and, how is it applicable? So typically in any organization where you have a POSH policy, people would say, as a woman, I know that this is meant for me. And the POSH Act also in its current form, it defines an aggrieved woman as the complainant. Your question around, how does it go beyond the gender binary and what is in it for cis men, right? So this particular question has led to a lot of debates and a lot of legal interpretations, if I may say so, regarding its applicability to transgender community as well as non-binary individuals. Now, beyond the legal mandate or beyond the statute, many organizations have progressively and proactively adopted a gender agnostic policy or a POSH policy. And it does not have to be just POSH. When I say POSH, it's one form of harassment, which is sexual harassment, but an overarching anti-harassment policy, if you will, which would cover all employees, regardless of their gender identity, regardless of their backgrounds or where they come from. And while these internal policies or organizational guidelines that you adopt, it may not override the legal limitations of the POSH Act per se, but they do definitely provide a mechanism, an internal mechanism whereby you can deal with certain scenarios, certain situations where the complainant is anybody else besides an aggrieved woman, right? And I think we have to empower the internal committee in such cases who would act more like a first level of reporting, where that becomes level one where you report such cases, and then the POSH committee or the internal committee then decides whether it has to be dealt by them or it has to be routed to a different grievance redressal cell which would deal with such scenarios. But definitely the mechanism has to be incorporated within the organization's framework. Now, that is about the gender binary. Now, its applicability to cis men, it's a very, very pointed question, right? So, again, lack of a formal recourse under the POSH Act, it leaves them with no place to go and make a formal complaint. But again, that doesn't stop organizations from having the same gender neutral policy where, see, from a inclusivity, I mean, we're talking about inclusivity and diversity, right? So from that perspective, it doesn't matter the complainant's gender, sexual orientation, doesn't matter. You're, as a human being, you're facing something, you're at the receiving end, and you might as well speak up and come to a place where you can raise a formal complaint, and with the confidence that it will be dealt with in a very confidential setting. So that's how today organizations are dealing with this.
Absolutely. I think a lot of inputs came in regarding like from you right now in terms of policies and in terms of also just the mindset that like that thing you said towards the end, that irrespective of whatever gender you may be, if you have faced some issue, you should get some kind of dignity and justice out of it.
Absolutely.
And absolutely, that stands true. So I think on that note, I would like to explore the kind of challenges that maybe non-binary and trans employees face in reporting workplace harassment. Shreyas, would you be open to elucidating some light on it? What
Absolutely.
kind of challenges? Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Meenakshi. I believe there can be multitudes of challenges a non-binary or a trans person might face. A couple of them that come to mind are that the first step of the system that's supposed to give them justice can be quite outdated and inconsiderate. A trans person might be forced to choose the fields male or female in the complaint form. So that's the most basic and the first step that can be changed. Another challenge that a person who's non-binary or trans might face, that they might not be confident enough to raise this to the PoSH committee or their HR POC, because they depends on the awareness that the company has, and openness the team might have to understand the challenges that such folks might be facing. They can also be a challenge where they might feel that their complaint might not be considered under PoSH. So what organizations and HR teams could do is give confidence to such folks that any instances of harassment will be dealt with utmost fairness, and increasing awareness would be the most basic step in giving them the confidence to report such instances, is what I believe.
Totally.
You
Just to add to that, there is always this fear of discrimination and retaliation, that part. And that could be inherent in anybody, not just the transgender community. And Shreyas rightly pointed out lack of understanding, in the sense that, will my voice be heard? Will I be dealt with in the right manner? And will my complaint be considered valid under the PoSH framework? So this is where I think, of course, the legal landscape in India is slowly evolving to recognize these rights. But nonetheless, from an organizational standpoint, the the platform that we can provide to them, in terms of, the open platform and the confidence that, every voice will be heard and will be dealt with utmost fairness. I think that point is crucial.
Yes, absolutely. I think I wanted to add here that even our internal committees, they need so much sensitization and training that because I don't think that we are there yet. A lot of companies are definitely forward thinking. They're taking the initiatives to train their internal committees to be sensitive. But a lot of times, I have been personally an external member in spaces where they are not understanding basics. In my opinion, basics in 2025 are to not moral police your victim who has come with a sexual harassment complaint, or a survivor who's come with a complaint, and all of those things. So when we are still there, also trying to include, like, do they even understand the unique challenges? Do people really understand, and do they understand, if I'm going to my internal committee, maybe I have an inclusive policy, but will my internal committee understand that this is indeed sexual harassment, or will they also dismiss me, saying this is not sexual harassment at all? This is some other problem you're facing. So it is so unique on how people undergo that sexual harassment. So very, I think, important for us to look at those as well. So thank you so much for the inputs. And now I'm also thinking, like, how I get it that we need to have a gender inclusive PoSH policy. So how can organizations create that? You mentioned it earlier, Anuradha, that a lot of people are doing gender neutral, gender agnostic policies, right?
Mhm.
So how do we create these gender agnostic policies? Is it a practice that happens, and would you want to throw some light on that?
I won't say it's a practice really. I mean, actually, it's all about, what message you are driving from the organization. Of course, like I said, many many organizations, many progressive or forward-looking organizations have adopted this and learned from each other, I would say. And basically creating these kind of gender inclusive policies within the existing legal framework in India, it requires organizations to think out of the box and go beyond the, check in the box or compliance checks, right? And they have to embrace the spirit of equity, spirit of equality. So while the PoSH Act is gender specific and the Transgender Persons Act, which you alluded to, it does provide us a level of protection. But beyond that, organizations can definitely proactively build inclusive workspaces. And the first step towards that would be creation or composing a comprehensive gender neutral anti-harassment policy. And that harassment, the nature of harassment could be different. So again, diversity. So this would be, I would say, in my view, would be the cornerstone of an inclusive workplace, where we have a holistic overarching policy, and that policy will be the basis, where every employee finds a place there. Like, yes, this is something that I'm covered here. I'm covered in here. That's the kind of confidence it needs to impart to them. And again, the law, the Act 2013 PoSH Act says the definition of aggrieved woman. I mean, the complainant basically is an aggrieved woman. So here there's a need to expand the definition to an aggrieved person. The person could be again belonging to any gender, having any sort of any preferences, any sexual orientation, doesn't matter. What matters is you have undergone something, you're not comfortable about it, some modesty has been compromised, and you need to bring it out to the right forum so that it can be dealt with in the right manner. And so this would ensure that any employee, any individual is covered, non-binary, transgender men, cisgender men, whoever has experienced any sort of harassment. Now, I would like to talk about what we do at Mastec. We sport a zero tolerance. I mean, that's again very prevalent in organizations, but when we say zero tolerance for any form of harassment or any form of discrimination against any person, and this is sacrosanct, absolutely non-negotiable. So while focusing on sexual harassment, the policy also can speak about specific forms of harassment like verbal, emotional, while on virtual environments, like the extension of the workplace definition has gone beyond any physical premise, right? Post-COVID era and even now when we are in the hybrid workspace. It doesn't stay restricted to a building or a workplace. So verbal, emotional, physical, of course, is there, psychological, and those can, these forms of harassment can impact the transgender and the non-binary communities or individuals because of their gender identity beyond what it could impact. I don't want to kind of specifically call that out, but that's what is the observation. And of course, clear reporting mechanisms goes a long way, because oftentimes people, yes, they face our situation, but they don't know where to go, what to do, whom to report to. Like Shreyas just mentioned, am I covered? Am I covered under PoSH? If not, then as per the Transgender Persons Act, they have mentioned that you should have a designated complaint officer, where all these other people, who probably think of themselves as not falling under the complainant category as per the PoSH law, can go and do that. But a lot of organizations are adopting a holistic, like I said, a level one, where all complaints, all harassment complaints can come, and then that level one decides which way to route it. And I think one of the critical things here is, the prohibition of retaliation. Oftentimes I've seen in my tenure as a chairperson, a lot of people are not willing to press charges. And the reasons could be different for different people, either fear of retaliation, fear of defamation, different apprehensions, family pressure, societal pressures, all of that. So I think a strict note to say, any form of retaliation will be dealt with the same level of, punishment that comes with harassment. So I think these are some crucial topics, points to be considered.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in, honestly.
Too much
Uh,
for one.
yeah. but I guess it was needed for us. Like having zero tolerance communication, in fact, not just in policies but in practice, and having PoSH policies that are gender neutral. Also, there is a way to extend the scope to the internal committee, wherein legally in the policy we mention that even though other genders are not covered under the act, the same process will be followed and we will treat it like a misconduct hearing. So, mentioning that scope extension also helps create the same panel who is equipped to train sexual harassment complaints, um, who is equipped to handle sexual harassment complaints. They can handle these as well. And I think some people are doing some great work. I have handled some same sex complaints, and uh, those were needed, and when those kind of complaints come through, and I'm like, the act does cover, however, women on women complaints. There is no restriction on female filing a complaint against another female, because respondent's gender is not specified. But yeah, I hope that that covers like other people as well, and hence the addition that we are bringing in. So now, because Shreyas, you come from an HR or people operations understanding. I mean, HR has grown in its ambit to not just be calling it a human resource, and I'm guessing the politically correct and the new understanding of HR is that people operations, and we are actually dealing with people and not human beings as a resource. I think that's the thought process from which it comes in my little knowledge. So I think Shreyas, I would really like you to input that people manager, people operations, and people who are dealing with people as resources. How can they ensure these things as gender inclusive complaint handling and all of those inputs that we require in general? So would you want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Meenakshi. So, first thing that would be the most important, I believe, would be to have the internal and the external panel member, internal at the first level, go through a gender diversity training for them to understand how to ensure complaints, the complainant's comfort, making them, open up in such a way that they're not threatened or have to worry about what will happen. How to provide them a safe space to present their concerns. A simple opening conversation also, where you ask the person what are their preferred pronouns, will let them know that yes, this is a place where I'm cared for. This is a place where people think more, beyond the binary. That's the most basic step to begin with. Once the complaint process has started, assuring the complainant about the confidentiality of the investigation, like Anuradha mentioned, throughout the process and even after that, the aftermath, ensuring that they know that they are safe will be quite crucial in ensuring we offer a inclusive complaint handling process, and also supporting others like them who might have gone through this, open up more and come forward. You're on mute, Meenakshi.
I think that input that, asking something as basic as pronouns, and I feel like that's such a good way to show that I am an ally. In fact, I usually put my pronouns in the chat in my next to my name. So even everyone has pronouns, right? Even cis people have pronouns.
Right.
Even people who are identifying with the same gender at birth, they also are going by either she, her, or he,
Yeah.
him. So mentioning those sometimes is a small step to say that we will not, we will be receptive if you are coming from a space. So I think that's a very wonderful input, Shreyas. So thank you so much for bringing that out. I think we need these kind of complaint handlings. And in fact, that DEI training, having gender sensitization training for your leaders, managers, um, and your IC committee members, absolutely. So whenever we work with IC members, we also in our quarterly connects, we always bring in that intersectionality. We think about, okay, maybe now we need to start thinking about DEI trainings. Like after May, June, we are done with our employee awareness trainings, we are done with leadership trainings, we are done with IC trainings. So once you're done with that, the next step is that is your workplace truly inclusive? That's when the real work begins, and that's when people should be looking at doing DEI trainings, understanding queerness, creating that safe space. So it's very important, even though often overlooked in a lot of spaces. But that being said, because we are talking about allyship, like how I am an ally by putting my pronouns, I wanted to ask you, Anuradha, this question, that how can bystanders and allies contribute to a more inclusive and safer workplace?
Mm. Interesting question. See, we spoke about, people not having the courage or being able to muster the courage to report or press charges when they themselves are the victims. How about a bystander doing so? So it's not easy, but I think while the PoSH internal committee and the presiding officer, they are at the sharp end of the spear, right, when it comes to dealing with any PoSH situation. I fundamentally believe that it's everybody's responsibility across board, across the organization, to ensure that we have a safe space, we have a congenial space to operate in, which means you have to report any inappropriate behavior or any undertones which have been observed immediately. You don't have to wait for a second incident to happen, right? So in this scenario, bystanders or allies, they play an absolutely crucial role, because what they are doing is they are creating a more inclusive and a safer workspace, and they're talking about, or they are actually practicing the zero tolerance ethos, which has been communicated already. And their actions can go a long way in defining shifting the workplace culture from where people would have said, harassment is probably tolerated, to where it is actively challenged and prevented. So I always say in all forums that the P in PoSH stands for prevention and prohibition. And every individual, definitely the IC committee is tasked with it, but every individual is responsible. So the first step I would say there is education and self-awareness. So while the IC committee, you just mentioned, Meenakshi, the usual annual trainings, the workshops, all of that definitely required from a compliance standpoint. But how about now bringing that into practice? So it's not just a tick in the box. So it goes beyond that. So first step is self-education, self-awareness. IC members are trained to handle situations, but are the employees equally aware? Are they aware of the policy? Do they know the organizational policy like the back of their hand? Like, do they know what is the role of a bystander? What they can do is, I mean, and I read this in one of the workshops where I attended, one of the slides which said that, understand your own biases first. Identify where you reflect on your own unconscious biases against any gender or any sexuality for that matter. And that's the first step towards mitigating your impact into various interactions and responses. And the 5 Ds, yeah, the 5 Ds that was defined for the what I would call it as the active bystander intervention is direct, distract, delegate, document, and delay. And they are self-explanatory, which means there could be a direct way of saying to the offender that, this is not the right behavior. It's not acceptable. And if you're not comfortable doing it directly for whatever reasons undefined, distract the conversation to a different way, to just say, hey, how about discussing this topic, or how about whatever, let's catch up on coffee, things like that. And if both these are not really comfortable with you, then you could delegate it. If you don't want to be the person coming in the front before the two parties that are involved, then you could delegate to a more authoritative figure, like like a manager, an HR manager, the IC committee, or any other trusted colleague for that matter. And see, document is a debatable point, whether you want to record that incident, whether you want to put it under an email or something. But of course, these are things you're doing, your intention is right, but don't put a documented complaint without asking the person involved, right? At least not the complainant. And the fifth D was delay. What delay means is if you can't intervene at that moment, then and there, then you, after the incident, check with the person who was targeted later on and offer your support, offer your, your help, your presence. And I think by and large, in this whole question about bystander and allyship, the ultimate goal is we are looking at psychological safety of our employees, right? And like I said, people are not very open to complaining or to pressing charges. Let's give that person another chance. Let's see if it was really intentional and things like that. But I think showing up as an ally means a lot to the person who was on the receiving end. And what does being an ally mean? Just be there, listen, show up with your presence, show that you care, right? And that confidence will get built up. So I think it's not just the IC members, because IC members are only present in that location in a smaller community, but they cannot be present everywhere, right? But these small steps, like, and these are the people who then in future become the champions or who evangelize. So I mean, the subject is really vast, and I get get carried away again. Too much verbose for that question, but I think that sets the tone.
Not at all too much verbose. I feel like a lot of verbose was required for us here. And thank you for bringing out the 5D principle and some very important concepts, because these are tools that literally every individual has in their arsenal to use when
Yeah,
something happens. And everyone says, how can I be part of the change? So it's also very important for us to send the message that you are the person who has to create a safe workplace for yourself and everyone around you. If
absolutely.
people don't get it, I see HR or manager, leader, they are just few in number. So that was a very important message you brought out, that everybody should definitely be a bystander or an ally.
Yeah, yeah.
And also being mindful of the survivors. Like,
Right.
don't just go and file complaint on someone's behalf. We can't do
No, no, no. Yeah, it's very easy to cast a blind eye to what's happening, right? How am I impacted? That could be the question. But that's where you're making an impact on the organization's culture, right? So
that.
take charge of the situation and do what is required is the message to every bystander.
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
just like to
Oh,
add a couple of things here. Thanks, Anuradha, for beautifully explaining what allies can do. I think what bystanders can also do is these instances might not always happen in front of the person that's being targeted. Can also happen behind their back. So bystanders in such situation can, like Anuradha mentioned, directly say that, hey, this is not something that's okay. We should not discuss such things. And if at all the person is there and they're going through these things, they're not comfortable raising these complaints, you help them reach the right resources that will give them the confidence to talk about it in the correct spaces. So these are a couple of things that allies or bystanders can do.
Absolutely.
absolutely. I think sensitization also requires a lot of work, and even trainings on sensitization with these things, and not just becoming champions of diversity in a sense that we are not actually championing for what the person wishes is not fair for the individual to go through as well. So thank you so much for that as well. And now coming to our next very interesting question to the people operations side of things to Shreyas. How can companies ensure fair investigations to that respect diverse gender identities?
Absolutely, a very important topic. I think staying away from assumptions is the most basic step here. For example, some folks might already have these preconceived notions that these folks are known to do such things. So, ये उन्हीं की वजह से हुआ होगा. Or they might have brought this upon themselves. This is not something that should be the thought process of anyone who's in such a powerful and important role. Objectivity will overall ensure giving a fair investigation for everybody that's involved. So training the PoSH committee members on gender identity, pronouns, unconscious bias will go a long way. This creates a respectful and also an inclusive environment and protects the dignity of all the individuals involved in the process. So I know we've heard the word training here a lot today, but training is the very first step to reach there and ensure a fair investigation process is followed.
Yeah. And I think training is definitely repeated, but there are different kinds of trainings also. Like there are trainings which are more facilitator styled and scenario based or role play sessions. Those really are beyond just training, one sided teacher based understanding, but it's more like not a classroom training, but somewhere where people actually learn from the sessions. Like I think some of the points you also brought out, Anuradha, like the 5D principle. You said that you learned it in some workshop that you
Yeah,
attended.
exactly. Yeah.
So it stays, right? And it's so important because I might have the knowledge of these things, but um, it's people like you who will be implementing these things in real life scenarios. So that would be the more impactful thing to do, to impart that knowledge and not gatekeep it in a certain way. So it's very, very necessary for us to bring that out. So I think with that, we have brought in a lot of questions from our end. There is one question in the chat. Before we address this question, I would like both of you to bring out some best practices that you think work in your own ways. How do existing workplaces protection need to evolve to fully support the LGBTQ employees, and what are the best practices around sensitizing employees? I'm sure we have covered a lot of it in the session, but this is a question to both of you. Either of you can start and take it up.
Okay. Shreyas, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, actually, I just missed. There was some network issue. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is that what do existing workplaces, how do existing workplaces protect and evolve to fully support the LGBTQ or SOGS employees?
Hmm.
And what are the best practices that you think exist to champion diversity in that sense?
Got it. Existing workplace protections can be, changed to add gender identity and expression in protected categories and policies. That the policies don't are not just restricted to women, but extend to folks with gender identities or orientations as well. Defining harassment to include a broader aspect of behavior, like misgendering, outing someone, mocking their identity. These things can also be included. Ensuring dress codes are not gender restrictive. That if you're a man, you have to wear this. If you are a woman, you have to wear this. These are some basic practices that folks can, like organizations can follow. In terms of some real world examples, I can think of is there are many companies like Accenture, Tata, etc. All have implemented neutral PoSH policies that covers harassments across gender identities, including folks from the LGBTQ plus community. Other companies also have such policies where internal complaint committees emphasize on intersectionality training. So these are some real world examples also that organizations can take because we know we've seen organizations take profits and leadership examples from these bigger organizations. But gender inclusivity is also something I believe these organizations can take as a learning point from such big organizations.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Shreyas. I think, Meenakshi, from my standpoint, for workplaces, to extend in India specifically to fully support the LGBTQ plus communities, a significant evolution is needed across the entire legal framework. But let's not talk about those blockers. Any organizations can go beyond. So while the legal framework will evolve whenever it has to, one thing that we could do is, do the gender agnostic or gender neutral policy, which I spoke about earlier. And beyond that, I think the strengthening of the Transgender Persons Act 2019 is also crucial. And these acts undergo their amendments at the right time, depending on how the bill gets passed. But from an organizational standpoint, beyond the legal mandate, a lot of things can be done to ensure that this community feels safe and feels feel a sense of belonging. Shreya spoke about this earlier in terms of the language, the inclusive definitions of use gender neutral language, recognize the diverse gender identities, and training of not just the HR and the IC personnel, but everybody to for them to overcome the unconscious bias, bystander intervention we spoke about already. And I think there's a concept of ERG, employee resource groups, which is not a very new concept. It's long standing since I believe back in 1960s when the civil rights movement came along. So that plays a crucial role in ensuring that it exhibits the moral and the psychological support that specific group of people need, and it's a very good initiative. So like-minded people come together and they form their own agenda, they form their own support system, if you will, and there are people who cooperate, who articulate, who support this. So I think with a very clear purpose in mind, these ERGs have the potential to, if amplified at the right level, they have the potential to culminate into a practice with the right affinity groups and people with the same thought process coming together. And I think being visible in pride events, you started the conversation with pride events, but being visible in those events and making some public statements, carving the right JD for LGBTQ plus job portals, all these things will make them feel inclusive. And
Yeah.
of course, these are small little things, but it goes a long way. And I think I spoke about zero tolerance, but I think a, a, a key point there is, there are microaggressions getting developed, which you might notice in some interactions, which if not nipped at the bud can translate or escalate to a very unwelcome or a very hostile environment. So those have to be kind of addressed right at the, nipped right at the bud. So these are small things,
Yeah.
but it goes a long way.
Absolutely. I think there are now, I think these were very powerful statements that came. I think I'll let people sit with them. And also, there are certain questions in the chat. I think we are filled with questions there. So I've tried to answer one question, but let's start taking up those questions if we are okay with it.
Sure.
So one question is from Aparna, saying bystanders might also face backlash. How should they be protected? This is a very interesting question. Anuradha, would you want to take this up?
Sure. I spoke about retaliation. So fear of retaliation, and it's part of the policy, right? So uh, that's the confidence that the organization gives to its employees that, without any fear of any backlash or any sort of uh, any sort of further damage, to either the complainant or the witness, because even witnesses don't come forward to strengthen a certain case. So that's the confidence that the organization has to give to every employee, saying, "Do not fear. We are here to handle it." And there are these psychological safety measures, as well as what you call them, EPA, the employee for the mental wellness. So all those kind of things also have to be provided to them, to say that you have nothing to fear. We are here to handle everything properly. And I think a lot of awareness and the sensitization counts here, because often the person who is at the receiving end, the victim, is already traumatized, and he or she doesn't want to go through another level of trauma by facing a backlash or this thing. So I think that's a very important clause, and I like I mentioned earlier, it invites the same level of punishment or repercussions as it would have been for a formal PoSH complaint. So retaliation is a offense, right? Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
answer, if that helps, Aparna.
Absolutely. Retaliation can be covered as an option in your PoSH policy itself.
Yep.
Though I want to highlight one thing, that recently there was a question filed to the Supreme Court saying that will retaliation be covered under PoSH Act, to which they said that however companies have a responsibility, but it's not covered under PoSH Act, unfortunately. But that means that we have to take our own measures against retaliation. It doesn't mean we stop
Yeah.
because the court said so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shreyas, would you want to take up a question from the panel? There is one that says, how do you address a concern where a trans person identifies as a woman and therefore wants to use the women's washroom? However, other female colleagues are not comfortable. So is this discrimination to if we ask the trans woman to use the unisex washroom?
Yeah. So it is, I mean, I believe it falls under discrimination. A solution to this would be, educate employees on inclusion and also offer unisex options for anyone who'd like to use those. But you can't restrict a trans woman to not to only use the unisex washroom. So these are some things that we could implement.
Thank you so much. I think it was a very simple,
Yeah.
straightforward answer that was required here. And yeah, thank you for that. And Harish has posed a question saying, could you share some examples of cases of harassment against cis men? I mean, most cases are against cis men. I'm guessing 90% are against cis men if I'm giving a number off my head. But I'm thinking, is it like they are the complainant, men as complainants? Is that the question? If
Yes, that's his
um,
question.
okay. So, would you want to take it up, Anuradha or Shreyas, or should I
Sure.
share examples? Please tell me.
Sure, sure. One of the examples could be the power dynamic scenario, where a senior female leader is the respondent in this case. A junior male employee may have reported coercive behavior or sexual innuendos. Similar things that any woman could go through, a man could go through as well. Harassment could be from a colleague of the same gender, verbal or physical harassment by a female colleague, unwelcome physical contact, all fall under some, the PoSH purview, and could be some of the examples that a cis man could go through.
Absolutely. In fact, I've handled two cases where men were complainants, and one was against a woman, and it was in similar lines where she made advances on him, and as soon as he rejected those advances, she started creating a hostile work environment for him, and he was really struggling to continue in the workplace. And she even threatened to file a PoSH complaint on him. So it was very rare occurrence that these things happen. This is not something we need to take as a template that all women are misusing the law. But there are such situations where people can misuse the law. But rest assured that your internal committee, if it's trained enough, they would understand and identify a malicious complaint if it is coming their way.
Yeah.
And the investigation process is there to ensure that people are not everyone gets a fair chance to present themselves. Other than this, there was one more complaint I handled where there were two men, and one of them was making a homophobic statement to the new employee man. And he was telling him that beware of this guy, he's like that. He was making these statements to belittle another employee who was gay. And during that time, we took it into consideration and we spoke to him. And in that conciliation meeting, the respondent is saying, oh, I didn't realize you were also queer, so I wouldn't have said it in front of you. So we were like, no, it's not just because the other person is also queer. You need to not say such things in a workplace, period. Even if it's a straight man, he can be offended by you being homophobic towards another employee, right? And they can be an ally or a bystander during that time. So there are different kinds of complaints that we have seen. In the chat, we are also talking about, I think somebody has also posed a question on um, where a trans woman is trying to hug or touch like any other women employee would during casual conversations, which is not welcome by women. So harassment, so Shripriya, I think that would be harassment towards that woman. Nobody can touch you without your consent, be it another woman or a trans woman or a man or any gender possible. No one can touch anybody without consent. So anyone can be a respondent, anyone can be a complainant. And there's also lot of conversation around psychological safety. There's a question on psychological safety. So I think while Anuradha has touched upon it, would either of you want to input more on how to create psychological safety, because employees often hesitate to report sexual harassment. Younger generation, they are not fully aware of what constitutes sexual harassment, or also people, queer community people, I feel like really struggle with
Yeah.
bringing up complaints.
Sure, I can take that, Meenakshi. See, psychological safety is a very large term or concept, but it creates a sense of well-being. You feel that you can operate without being judged. You can operate without any fear, or it's building an open environment. How do you do that beyond the usual norm of training, awareness, sensitization? What would help? I think a top-down approach from leadership, because the commitment any organization would have to a zero tolerance stance or a anti-harassment policy, no matter how much you talk about it, it has to be, I would say, drilled into or hammered into every employee's minds and brains that look, we are in this together. We will not tolerate anything which goes against a person's violating a person's modesty or dignity. And it goes beyond. So I'll again talk by example what we have done at Mastic, right? uh, Minashi, you already spoke about it. Beyond the documentation, beyond the policies, having to the policy could be like a 30 pager or a 40 pager document, but take out smaller nuggets from the policy to explain a certain concept of impact versus intent, explain the concept of sexual harassment versus workplace harassment. And we have done this. We have brought those few members together. We have told them, enact, make a small scenario or make a small video out of it. And that video nugget gives you drives home the message, right? So then the retention is longer, right? And then employees start getting understanding that yes, it's not just on paper, it's not just a tick in the box. We are really serious about our commitment to creating and building and fostering a zero tolerance and a workspace where everybody feels respected. That is one way of looking at it. Other way that we have done is we have created scenario based questions. So we talk about case studies not just within the IC workshop, because IC workshop happens once a year and there are refresher programs. But with all our employees, what we do is we conduct a case study, saying we just throw a case study to them and tell them, look, do you think this is sexual harassment? Do you think this is workplace harassment? What is it? And there's a brainstorming exercise, or you may call it as like a focus group discussion, right? And that opens them up. And not everybody is comfortable talking about harassment, sexual harassment, leave it aside. So these kind of conversations opens up the avenues for them to speak about it. What we have also done is, being March being the women's, IWD month, Women's Day. I mean, I say every day is Women's Day, but because of the focus on Women's Day in March, what we did was we had a very exclusive session just for women. Again, with due respect to everybody here, just for women, because sometimes they may not be comfortable talking about the problems they are facing in front of men. And those men could be from the committee, those men could be their own colleagues. And you could have similar sessions with just the men community, just the men folks, just the other communities, whatever. I'm just throwing some ideas which has worked for us, and that in turn helps create a safe environment and ensures psychological safety. But this is something very unique to every individual, very unique to every organization. But it has to go beyond the usual training and the video trainings. It has to be a conversation where you feel you can ask anything and you still have the answer to it. So that's how.
Okay. Yes, effective mechanisms like ERGs and
Yeah.
like EAP programs and uh, anonymous reporting portals in fact, like wherein people know that my complaint will directly go to the internal committee and no one else. Those
Absolutely.
are also very, very important for one to understand. And even one-on-one check-ins with HRs and managers to see if people are okay every month
Yeah.
are necessary.
And
Um,
no amount of one single training session or one workshop will not help. You have to be consistently at it. You have to keep reinforcing the message in different ways, different forms, so that it instills and people understand the psychology behind it, and then they start establishing the trust around the framework.
Absolutely. Now, because we are reaching towards the end of our time today, and I think we have addressed most of the questions. Shreyas, would you want to give any closing thoughts that you may have missed out on?
I believe at the core of the conversation that we are having today, there's a simple truth, which basically says that I believe every human being deserves safety, dignity, respect in the workplace. These are not special rights that we're asking for to be offered to folks from the LGBTQ community. These are basic human rights. I think it's time for our policies and our attitudes also to evolve. A lot of folks from the community face harassment too, but often these fall through the cracks of the system. So extending PoSH protections beyond the binary is not just a necessary step, I believe it's a moral one. And inclusion shouldn't just be a checkbox. It's the culture that we build every day. And it will only grow through awareness, empathy, and action. So I think it's everybody's responsibility, not just the internal committee's responsibility or the PoSH committee's responsibility or the HR community's responsibility. It's the leadership that should be responsible to drive it, from up there.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shreyas. Any closing thoughts, Anuradha?
Yeah, Shreyas has covered it all, but just one last thing is, whatever we do towards building a safe workplace, it has to be done in the spirit. It's not just compliance. It has to be woven into the very fabric and, culturally embedded. And I know it takes a village to do that, but I think every single person is responsible. It's like every drop in the ocean counts. Similarly, every single employee, every single part of the organization is responsible. So all the best with creating safe workspaces.
Thank you so much. It is a Herculean task that we have decided to take upon ourselves at Kelp, but we do believe that we can make it happen. We have some very high targets on this. And we are glad to have even people like you in our conversations where we know that there are people who are willing to create change. So that really matters. So, that being said, I hope that we have covered most of the questions. Any further doubts that we may have not successfully answered, or any other questions that are coming to you, you can reach out to us at info@kelphr.com. And if you go to our website, there's also an AI chatbot that will redirect you to us in case there is any kind of query that comes up. And I would like to heartfully thank Shreyas and Anuradha today for bringing in all their vibrant, rich perspectives and this can do, I'm going to be an ally attitude that is so positive and such a great start to today and in general to bring this conversation in place before we get into Pride Month activities or going beyond Pride Month activities. I think this was a great conversation starter. So thank you so much, everyone. Also, audience, you have asked some wonderful questions. So thank you so much for all your inputs and questions as well. And yeah, I wish you all a very happy weekend that is coming ahead. And thank you so much again for being a part of this conversation today. Yeah.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.